Hey everyone, I'm Joel Searles here, Samurai Pulse, and I've got William Broyles Jr., Oscar-nominated screenwriter. You'll know him from his work in Castaway, Apollo 13, The Polar Express, and China Beach, just to name a few of his top films. It's great to have you here, Bill. It's a pleasure, as always. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Joel. Thank you. And I also, yeah, that's a very nice introduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, did you mention Jarhead? Because that's a Marine Corps movie. Did you say that?
I didn't, but that'll definitely be included here in the podcast for sure. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
that's one of my
I
favorites.
Yeah, you did a great job there, and it was interesting as a film to see from a Gulf War perspective what that was like as a Marine. But it'd be great to hear more about Castaway, what led you to write that, and any inspirations you had from your time in country and coming home, maybe specific ones that related to
Oh,
the film and showed up in the film.
okay. Well, there's what the film looks like it's about, and there's what the writer may be thinking it's about, and most importantly, it's what the audience is about. Um,
Yes.
and one of the things that helped motivate me in the writing of it
Mhm.
was um, I felt like it was a metaphor for my Vietnam experience. That
Yes.
the main character, is living his ordinary life, and he's suddenly swept away, and dropped into a strange world where he doesn't necessarily have the skills or the experience to survive, and has to learn very difficult conditions, dig deep in himself, and find the qualities and the ability to survive, and to find meaning, and to find a community, even if it's with a volleyball, that can help you get through it. And then to finally return, and sometimes under difficult situations, and find that the world you left has stayed the same, although you're very changed. And
Right.
not much interest in what you did, or no one really has the vocabulary to understand. And so you feel isolated, and as much as you felt in the strange world you were in. And I thought that was a really good, but that, that there was always hope, and that the line he says, "Tomorrow the sun will rise, and who knows what the tide will bring." And I wanted it to be a kind of hopeful thing that you could then make your own, and end with the idea of he has his whole life ahead of him. Um,
Right.
so that was always been, and it's a metaphor also for any kind of really difficult situation that life throws your way: a death of a parent or a child, a cancer diagnosis, being raped, or having someone you love murdered, or lose, all the things that can happen that immediately remove you from the experience of the people around you, and you have to then somehow manage to get through, and move on. And I just feel like that movie, it continues to speak to me that way as I've gone through. It's really interesting. It's like 25 years old now,
Yeah.
and I still see it all the time. I mean, on TV, and I've watched it recently, and I don't really look at it like I wrote it now. I just look at it like it's a piece of film or storytelling that speaks to me today. Um, and every now and then I think, oh my God, I wrote that. Um, and or someone with my name, whoever I was back in the 90s wrote that. Um, but yeah, it has a lot. And Flags of Our Fathers, Jarhead. Um, talked about Jarhead some. I don't know if we were on mic when we did that or not, but
Yeah, I've got Jarhead on
okay,
recorded. Yeah.
okay, good. And it's just really, when I'll tell you this little story. So I was two parts. One is I had a couple of guys wounded, so I went back to the Naval Hospital and
Yeah.
to visit them. And you know, you see blood and people die, but to go into that huge hospital with nothing but 19 and 20-year-olds, incredibly brutally murdered, loss of limbs, eyes
Yeah.
burned, and I just fainted. Boom, and I broke my nose. That was my combat injury. I
Yeah.
fainted in the hospital, and this nurse helped me come to. And I looked at her and I thought, oh my God, how do you do this? how do
Yeah.
you do this every day? And then back on the mountain, I remember we were out on top of a mountaintop, like similar to where we were in the first story, and I saw this little streak of light go across the sky. It was like a line or something, and that. And I thought, by the way, I was thinking, all my friends from Oxford, or they've gone to law school and graduated. They've got jobs at banks, or they're in the diplomatic corps, or they're doing their own business, or they're becoming doctors. And here I am with these 19-year-olds, um, dropouts in the mud in the mountains of Vietnam, and I'm going to die and be killed for nothing, and my life's going to be over. So I was really low. I was really low, and turned out that nurse was the inspiration for China Beach,
Right.
and told that streak of light going across the sky was the Apollo 13 on its way to the moon. So I just like to stop and think about that. I have no idea what that means or the universe had in mind, but just, and the message I draw from that is that even in the darkest times you face in your life, there might be clues or indications or ladder or a life-saving ring tossed to you that can take you to the different parts of your future. Um, and so in some ways, the groundwork for my whole TV and film career, unbeknownst to me, was laid there. Um, and I don't know what that means again. I just know that I find it one of those things that means that life is really full of mysteries we don't understand. And we just keep, you know, pounding the rock, doing our job, doing the best we can. And sometimes things come along that you don't expect, both for take you in the dark places or take you to the light. But I could never have done any of those things. I wouldn't have started Texas Monthly. I started Texas Monthly, which has been around for over 50 years, a magazine in Texas. It's a really profitable, successful magazine that I started. And I'd been out of Vietnam less than 2 years. Uh,
Hmm.
I was the editor in chief of Newsweek like 10 years after I got out of the Marine Corps with nothing, no background, no connect. You're just, and I would have never done that without my Marine Corps experience of having been in Vietnam and being in charge of those um, kids. And also, the other thing is watching those colonels and the generals do what they
Yeah.
did. And the way my first general, he was the ADC, they gave him the logistics go, and he would go out some unit and he would look at someone's rifle and says, "This needs or whatever. Where'd you get your ammo? Oh, it comes from here." And he would go and follow every step of that ammunition box all the way back to where it came into the next Saigon on a ship. And how does it get here? And why does it go over there when it could go? He just was. He didn't sit in the office. He was out always. We were out all day long, every day, like 12 hours a day. And it was, I, I've done a TV series where I didn't even have an office. There's like 4 or 5 of us with a chair. And because I was always on the set, or I was moving around, I was going to all the departments, and that's what he did. I mean, I learned that from the Marine Corps. It's that you need to show up. Um,
Right. And showing up is 80% of success in life, but the Marine Corps definitely you put the work ethic in and you're able to go to newer heights and a higher level for sure, which I definitely believe you did. It shows. Um, in hearing your thoughts here and comments not only about Castaway but your career, I reflect on the different work you've done and Jarhead, Castaway, Flags of Our Fathers, and one that sticks out to me out of those three is from Castaway, and it's the sense of where you go off. Tom Hanks goes to an island, and he's trapped there. And in many ways, I mean, you're dedicated to a tour in country. You're pretty much you're there. You're not going anywhere else unless something happens where you're injured or like a Red Cross message.
that's
But
right.
Hanks comes back and the world's moved on without him, and it's brutal. and a lot of it's similar in the military. A lot of veterans I knew came back from Iraq or Afghanistan and didn't realize how much would have changed in their 7 months or 9 months, or even if they did a 12-month tour there, and they came back and it's a different world, and it's something that, I, even as a reservist, still experience when I go do operations or things in the reserves, and I come back and things have moved on without me. And see, you very much so replicated that for Tom's experience in the film for his character. That when he came back, his love life had moved on, and things around him had changed so much. People thought he had passed, and so they had moved on with their life. And it's a very powerful point you brought to that film that I think only you, as a Vietnam vet, could have brought to it. I don't know if any other writer, if they hadn't had some Vietnam or military experience where they had deployed, to a life and death situation, would have been able to replicate that and kind of show that to civilian people, which I'm sure shocked some audiences, or they were already intertwined in the story, and so they got to experience and live some of that through what they saw on screen. So that's something that sticks out in my mind about your work, and the element of having lived Vietnam and brought and came home, and you did transition, and Tom's character leaves the film with a sense of hope for the future there at the crossroads, and that sounds like where you started off with Texas Monthly and pressed forward and then moved into Newsweek. So just to make that circle all the way around here in our conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, that's a really beautiful way to put it. And I think China Beach, I
Thank you.
think, was really super important too, because it was, um, but yeah, wow. That's really true. I like the way you put all that.
Thank you. Um, it's been on my mind for a while, and so I wanted to reach out and talk with you about it, and share it for our listeners. Um, you had worked on Saving Private Ryan, is that correct?
No, that's in Wikipedia, but that's not correct. I've tried. They once had me being a fighter pilot shot down in Vietnam, which is where he got his themes of being isolated. And I tried to correct that one for years. That I did not get shot down. I was not in. And the thing about Saving Private Ryan, the only thing that's true about, well, I was working on a film about Khe Sanh with Tom Hanks. Uh,
Yeah.
one of my, and we were so close to getting it made. And then he came in and said that he was going to have to postpone Quezon because he was going to do another movie, and it was Saving Private Ryan. Um, and so that's we postponed it. And it never, it happens in the business. It never ended up. The stars never ended up getting aligned for it. And I also was going to do a movie about Pappy Boyington with Tom Cruise that never
Mm-hmm.
got made. It's called Black Sheep, The Black Sheep. Since you mentioned, the TV series, but it was those are my two Marine Corps movies that I've yet to get filmed. But because every writer in Hollywood, has everybody looks at the films you did get made, and I'm so grateful for them and so honored by the talents of all the people who worked in them. But you always the ones that didn't get made, they stick with you too, right? And because you put just as much time into writing them, and just as much effort, just as much research, just as much of your life. Um, and those are two, I'd love to see those get made. And but I think the chances are pretty slim.
With the way the industry's gone and the way it's kind of going through a restructuring and coming back from COVID and coming back from a strike and all the things going on, it's a challenge for great scripts to get made. And I'm sure both of yours, the Khe Sanh and Pappy Boyington ones, are wonderful. I mean, if they're anything like Castaway or Apollo 13, or Jarhead or Flags of Our Fathers. We keep touching on those. Polar Express is a wonderful film, which is outside of your, military genre. So, if it's anything like those, I'm sure it'd be great to see. For uh, Jarhead, something comes to mind, being familiar with the film and the book. there was a great frustration that the Swafford character had by not getting to utilize his scout sniper skills at the end of the film. And hearing some of your experiences there in country, was there any of your, and I would gather that say the answer is yes, but I want to hear it from you. Was there any of your emotional experience from Vietnam, the frustrations of that war in general, brought to your Jarhead screenplay?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, it's a lot of the interaction among the men. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even though it's set in Kuwait, and
Yep.
very much like the interaction among men in my platoon. You know, so I those kinds of details of the shitbird and then the kind of guy that's a little too a savage and
Yep.
must be reined in, the guy that can't get anything right, and off on and on. The guy that's sent to burn the shitters and ends up burning the whole latrine as opposed to just the. So anyway, there's all that stuff um, came from my basically my unit, and also interestingly, the connection between is interesting between Jarhead and Apollo 13 because they're
Hmm.
both films, and Apollo 13 is another interesting film. These are military guys up there flying it, and is
Yeah.
happens when your dreams don't come true. Because to me, the most important character in Apollo 13 is the Gary Sinise character who gets booted off the flight
Yep.
at the last minute and thinks that he has lost everything, but then he's the only one that can save them. It's again kind of like me, is that you don't know what the reversals in your life are, where they're leading you. They may be leading you to your failures, may be leading you to a more productive and fruitful life than your successes do. Um, and again,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't get to the moon. They didn't get to take the shot in Jarhead. Um, what does happen when your dreams don't come true? And then a lot of the stuff at the end where they come home and they have a parade, and the Vietnam vet gets on the bus and talks about how proud he is of them.
But
And
yeah,
that's me.
Jarhead.
That's me. I wanted to play that scene. They wouldn't let me act it. But they wanted actually someone who could act as opposed to me. And the guy does a great job. He's got on his own field jacket and um, with his patches. No, it was um, it's just it was really an homage to the Marines of the next generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the war they got. That's the war they
Right.
got.
Yeah, they had Vietnam in their head, and their war was Desert Storm, and it was 72 hours. And
Yep.
you know, our military, I think, General Schwarzkopf and General Powell and General Boomer and all those men who served in Vietnam and had come home to a country they didn't, sometimes they probably
Right.
didn't want to know or know and weren't treated fairly at all. They went and took that frustration out on the Iraqi forces and Saddam's military. To my knowledge, that was the third largest military in the world at the
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, they've been
And
fighting Iran, with huge. But there's one thing I wanted to say because this just popped into my mind. Um,
yeah,
really important is that there's a scene there where Jake Gyllenhaal goes over the dune and ends up seeing a bunch of Iraqi soldiers that have been burned in a jet strike, kind of like
yeah,
crispy critters part, and sits there
yeah.
and it's like seeing them as human beings like himself. He throws up. And when I went to the dedication of Vietnam Memorial in '82, I was looking at the face, it's black granite, and I was looking at the names and I started seeing faces. And why me? Why are they back there? Why did I survive? All that survivor guilt. And I started seeing some Vietnamese faces that I didn't just random, and they were and really like a portal, like you were seeing through into between life and death. And I
Yeah.
became really like, who were those guys on the other side of those tracer bullets, those green tracer bullets that came at us? Who were those guys, that survived the B-52 strikes in the jungle and being, napalm? And who were the guys that crawled through our wire in the middle, the night naked and with satchel charges? I wouldn't do that. Who
Yep.
were they? And so I went back to Vietnam in '84, I was the first combat guy to go back to the actual battlefields. And
Mm.
I was there a month. I traveled 3,000 miles. I met all of these people. I met generals. I met the foreign minister. I met everybody. And we debated the war. They gave me all the experience of what it was like to be under a B-52 strike, which I couldn't imagine because even when they're miles away, just the ground is shaking with the earthquake, right? And you think, oh my
Yep.
God, nothing can happen. And that was what their experience was like. I sat around the fire with uh, Vietnamese veterans of the war, and we changed war stories. And they
Yeah.
were really so happy to see me. I thought there was no embassy, no nothing. They could have just disappeared me, and no one could have done anything about it. But I was treated with such respect and courtesy, and even just and already the people in their villages had forgotten them. This was 1984, so the war had been over 10 years, and
Mm.
um, and to be there and to see them, and I realized in some ways I had more in common with them and my men and I did than we did with the people back in the rear in Da Nang. And by the way, the other bizarre thing about my story that I started with was when I
Yeah.
said I get this is, oh guys, wake up! Da Nang is being rocketed. And you know what happened? All across my position, people started to cheer. It was like those are RIMPs, I don't want to repeat them from TV, what RIMP stands for, Rear Echelon Blank Blank, are finally
Yeah.
getting a taste of the war. All the guys back there having hot food and hot showers and going to in the EM club. And then, while we were out there in the mud, there was a lot of resentment of the people in the rear. And as placeholders for people back in the States who had seen us
Right.
and had no idea what we were there for. And these guys, these Viet Cong and North Vietnamese, they were out in the jungle with us. They just had this little tube of rice. They were in the mud. They were being shelled. They we couldn't have had the war without them. We were two pieces of the same thing. In that boundary, like the wall, that granite wall that was like a portal. Well, between life and death. Well, the line between your comrades and the enemy is that's the most brutal final line that any living people can draw, right? One
Hmm.
side are people you do anything for, sacrifice your own life. The other side are people that want to kill you and you have to kill them. And
Yeah.
but then to meet them as human beings and to it was quite incredible. In fact, I was down in Hill 10 finally toward the end, and
Yeah.
well,
That
actually
tour.
about the middle, where my uh, battalion had been. And I
Hmm.
stood there, and there was nothing there, of course, and all the things that seemed so far away, the huge mountains that were there were. It was much smaller when people aren't shooting at you. Um,
Yeah.
and I met these two Viet Cong on the road from Hill 10. One guy had been one of the commanders, and they had tunnels, and he had worked at the base, and a woman whose husband had been killed. And we started talking, where was he killed? Oh God, in the Bowbands. That was in the notorious VC area. When? Oh, December '69. Oh, interesting. About when? Oh, a couple of weeks before Tet, a month before Tet, late into December, and whatever it was. And I thought, well, I was patrolling right there then. And I remember getting in a small combat, and we found one body, and of course they just got buried in a mass grave. We took it back, um, and I thought, my men and I might have killed your husband. And she just looked at me and she said, "Oh, well, that was during the war. The war is over." And then she invited me into her little house, her little with the altar with a picture of her husband on it. And
Yeah.
I thought, wow, could I do that? Could I do that? I think it helps if they won, and that the whole country felt that his sacrifice was worth it, and so on. But still, it's there's a humanity that survives war that not just among the people that fight on each side and that come, but across that line, and that was a really transformative experience for me because we the way we were able to fight. people and kill them is we have to dehumanize them, make them some sort of other, and give them nicknames, Jats, Gooks, whatever, um, infidels, um, so that they're not our neighbor, as in love thy neighbor as thyself, the commandment. Um,
Right.
and it just really felt like a microcosm to me of bringing those faceless other people to life and seeing them have some of the same camaraderie, the same humanity, the same everything that we do. And also just their stories of fighting for 5, 10, 20 years, sometimes
Yeah.
with one letter from home. I thought, okay, I see, I get it, you know, um, really did a lot of research. And like I went down to the Sea of Cortez to see what it would really be like. And
Yeah.
these Mormon hippies dropped me off on a beach and said, see ya. I had nothing, nothing. And I had to survive. I had to do exactly what he does in the film. I had to find some shelter. I had to figure out how to open a coconut. I did all those things. I had to do everything. I had to figure out how to get some water. Uh, I had to do all that. And
Right. You're on Wilson.
I ate the raw. I speared stingray and ate
Wow.
raw stingray. And but I was getting sick of it. I tried to eat raw crab, and I couldn't do that, just like he couldn't. And so I was don't know what to do, and I tried to make fire, and all those things in the Boy Scouts didn't work. And my Mormon hippies were like two sand dunes over, just kind of to be there in emergencies. And that
Yeah.
night, I was really thinking I cannot eat another raw stingray. And the wind changed, and it blew the smell of cooked bacon over to my little shelter of palm fronds, in the sand. And
Yeah.
they were playing the Grateful Dead or something, trucking like the music. And I just said, okay, I want to be completely authentic, but I've got to have fire. So I go over and they told me how to make fire with the kind of trough method. And I went back and I made it work. And I did what he did. I built a big fire on the beach and danced around it singing, "Come on, baby, light my fire." And so all that's based on real experience. But I thought that's my movie. He goes from primitive man to fire, and then he can, do some art and have a little more time to look into his spiritual life, um, and so that's the film. And I thought, well, I'll just stay a couple of nights because got now that all that difficulty of physically surviving was done, I realized I was really lonely. God, I was lonely. Maybe I go talk to these guys. And no, I can't do that because he couldn't do that. So on the third morning, I went down to the beach and a volleyball had washed up on the beach, swear to God. And I took some seashells and a little bit and seaweed and started talking to it. Oh, Wilson, thanks for coming. I could use some, blah, blah, blah. And then it was time to go. So I just tossed the volleyball aside and started to get in the van. And I just thought, idiot, that's the movie. The movie is about that we are not I, that we are we, that we are social creatures, that we need humanity. We need families, we need friends, we need other people. And even if you don't have anyone, you can turn a volleyball into a companion. And that will get you through. And that was the key to the whole movie. And I didn't think it up. I'm not that smart. The tide brought it to me. The tide
Mm.
brought it to me. And like I said, that's why he says at the end, tomorrow the sun will rise and who knows what the tide will bring. And the tide
Right.
brought the porta potty too, that gave him the idea of how to get off the island, and um,
Right.
so it was, and so it was really just, I just, I didn't, I wasn't that, I mean, I just paid attention. I just wrote down what happened, and I turned that into
Right.
his experience, basically, of every little thing. And that's how the volleyball came about. I think I like to say it's so much better that it was a Wilson volleyball and not a Mizumo, because I don't think it would have been quite so good if Tom Hanks had been yelling Mizumo, Mizumo instead of Wilson. Um,
Right.
and and I think when he loses Wilson now, it's to me the most emotional uh, moment in the whole film.
That
Um,
came to my mind while you were telling your story was him telling Wilson he was sorry. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's like he's like lost
Sorry,
his
Wilson.
friend.
Oh my God, just sobbing. And that's
Yep.
when he takes the oars and just lets them go and
Hmm.
surrenders to the ocean, you know? And to me, that was very important. And also, it was very important that the whale showed up and that his first connection to another living conscious creature was to a different species. And the whale saves his life, and we're all connected in some way, I think. And the ocean, he gave himself to the ocean and he was saved. And you can see whatever spiritual or religious or consciousness image in that you want to, or nothing, right? It's just a film. Um, and but that's how Wilson came about. It came about for me and all that, the whole movie really, of going down and not, writing it from other movies or from books, but just experiencing it myself.
Right, right. No, that's great. That definitely is an add to the interview because I wanted to know some inside baseball there on the film, and I think that's probably the most profound inside baseball I could ask for outside
Yeah.
of your Vietnam experience directly and influencing the storyline and his character going and being gone and coming back to a different world and being like on Mars. Um, are there any
And
other
you, and
productions?
just Joe, just interrupt for 1 second. And
Yep.
and the companion you make under those difficult settings, like trying to survive on an island alone, and his
Yep.
emotional connection to Wilson is not unlike the camaraderie and connection you have to your fellow Marines in a combat situation, right?
Right.
And again, it's not a one-to-one thing, but it's something I had in mind. Um,
Mhm.
it's if I hadn't had that experience in Vietnam, I don't know if I could have written that quite the same way. So there you have it. Thanks so much.
Well, bye bye.
Bye.